Nothing leaves paranormal fanatics scratching their heads more than poltergeists. But what exactly is a poltergeist? What is it like to have one infest your home and terrify you beyond all belief? Well, today I've got 3 horrifying real poltergeist stories and some theory behind what they could have been. Hi, my name is Mike, and let's get into the video. The first case we're going to look at is, I'm really sorry, it's just not spooky enough in here. The first case we're going to look at is the Bothell Hell House. The Bothell Hell House refers to a poltergeist case that happened in Seattle, Washington. The owner of the house, Keith Linder, started experiencing strange goings-on like phantom taps and knocks and Bibles disappearing, as well as all of the cupboards in his kitchen opening simultaneously for a split second after he stepped out of the room. Keith and his then girlfriend also witnessed a potted plant levitate out of its pot and rotate in mid-air. Keith actually featured on an episode of Ghost Adventures called Demons in Seattle. Strangely, Ghost Adventures didn't find any poltergeist activity within his home. Since then, Keith has been very vocal about his disappointment in Ghost Adventures, how they didn't spend much time at his house, and how they didn't get on with him or his then girlfriend. After the Ghost Adventure situation, the poltergeist activity ramped up as it so often does in these cases, and Keith and his then girlfriend witnessed a rug in their living room fold itself instantaneously in half right in front of their very eyes. The rappings, knocks and bangs intensified, and spontaneous puddles of water started appearing in the house, with no known source even after all the pipework was inspected for leaks. Possibly Keith's most harrowing experience is when he saw a woman in black and white poke her head around the door to his office. As she quickly retreated, Keith got out of his chair to give chase, and in the seconds it took him to get to the doorway, she had vanished into thin air. Keith has a number of theories that his poltergeist was an intelligent being that was able to manipulate quantum physics theorem, which would explain how it was able to make objects levitate, start fires out of thin air, and manipulate objects instantly. Keith's haunting culminated with the Bibles that had gone missing reappearing months later while being burnt, and a mysterious black substance being written on the walls, spelling out Die KL. A poster in Keith's office also caught fire spontaneously. Keith eventually left the Bothell house and wrote 3 books documenting his ordeal. The activity continued after he moved, but faded and disappeared altogether after a short period of time. Next we travel to the UK, and more specifically Newcastle upon Tyne, for the case of the South Shields poltergeist. As in most poltergeist cases, this one centres around an adolescent child as the centre of most of the activity. For the purpose of this video, we'll call him Billy. Billy lived with his mum and stepdad, and he was quite happy until seemingly out of nowhere the haunting started. As with most poltergeist cases, the activity started with knocks and phantom noises, and included the poltergeist stacking some of Billy's toys repeatedly, the same toys, in the same positions, over and over again. This case took a very sinister turn and ramped up to locking Billy inside of his room and placing one of his stuffed toys at the top of the stairs on a chair with a knife in his hand. The poltergeist at one point also knocked a ladder into his stepdad's face, cutting it. Enough was enough, the family thought, and got in contact with a local paranormal investigation team to offer advice and hopefully get rid of their unwanted guest. The entirety of the team's experiences are actually documented in the book The South Shields Poltergeist, which is well worth reading if you haven't. The activity continued and began to evolve into new activity, such as sending threatening messages to the parents' mobile phones, both from known and unknown numbers, while the phones had all been placed on the kitchen table where everyone could see them and no one was touching them. The Polt also began to throw Billy's toys at people, whether these were small Lego bricks or much larger objects. It seemed to have taken a particular dislike to Billy's stepdad. The paranormal investigation team used a number of methods to try and contact the poltergeist, such as using 2 writing boards that they placed in Billy's room and left there while asking questions so the poltergeist could write messages back to them. Some of the more interesting observations were that the poltergeist's writing were quite childish, with a lot of spelling and grammatical errors. They also theorised that the poltergeist could be quite OCD, as it had a habit of stacking the same items over and over again and moving items to specific places repeatedly. Much like all poltergeist cases, the activity started to fizzle out before disappearing altogether. This seems to be a trait with almost all poltergeist cases, where they start slow, ramp up, go away for a period of time, come back worse, and then eventually just disappear altogether. As a final horrifying note, The poltergeist activity followed the parents to their jobs and caused havoc in the workplace. This leads into the theory that poltergeists tend to haunt people rather than places. While you're here, if you like the video, please drop a like on it and consider subscribing to the channel. I would also love to hear your thoughts on any of these stories in the comments below. Next we move over to Nova Scotia in Canada and go back to 1878. In a small town called Amherst, an 18-year-old woman called Esther Cox started experiencing a poltergeist haunting. The haunting seemed to begin after a traumatic event where Esther was held at gunpoint by her boyfriend. Esther started suffering from seizures in bed and her body painfully swelled for no apparent reason. She also had fever-like symptoms. Then, the paranormal activity started with phantom knocks and bangs and a box of fabric moving out from under her bed and being flung into the air by unseen hands. The frightened family called in a doctor, and while examining Esther, bedclothes moved by themselves, scratching noises were heard, and the words "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill" appeared on the wall above Esther's bed. The doctor prescribed sedatives to help Esther sleep, but this only seemed to make things worse by the noises getting louder and flying objects manifesting themselves. The activity continued for several months before Esther contracted diphtheria and spent time in New Brunswick at her sister's house recuperating. Upon returning to Amherst, the activity returned as well, with spontaneous fires breaking out at various places in her home, and Esther claiming she saw a ghost who told her she was going to burn her house down. By 1989, Esther couldn't take it anymore and moved in with another local family. Unfortunately, the poltergeist activity followed her and was witnessed by many other people. Esther was frequently slapped, pricked and scratched by the ghost, and on one occasion stabbed in the back with a clasp knife. At this point, Esther and her haunting were well known, and this attracted Walter Hubble, a stage performer, to investigate. Hubble spent weeks investigating the case, reportedly seeing items moving, fires breaking out, and objects appearing out of thin air. He claimed to see these things even when Esther was in full view and not connected to the items that were moving. He also witnessed the attacks on Esther with the sharp objects, as well as her extreme swelling and pain. There is a theory to suggest that poltergeist activity could be an emotional release of people suffering extreme trauma and pain, especially in the case of young women or children who are going through puberty. This seems to make some sense, as a lot of poltergeist cases are centered around teenage children. Esther began working for a man called Arthur Davidson, but after his barn burned down, he accused Esther of arson. She was accused and sentenced to 4 months in prison, and she was released after only 1. After her stint in prison, the haunting stopped entirely. Esther went on to live a full life, marrying twice and having children, before passing away at the age of 52. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into these strange and terrifying poltergeist cases. I'd love to hear which is your favourite in the comments below, and on screen now is our most active investigation that I'm sure you will love. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon.